the moderator of the meeting. Welcome to the California Board of Psychology meeting. Before we get started, I would like to remind board members and senior staff who are not speaking to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will interject with a brief friendly reminder or simply mute the microphones. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board president reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, public comment will be requested. At the board's direction, I will turn on and announce the opening of the question and answer feature. It is not necessary to identify yourself in order to make a public comment. If any attendees utilize a profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subjected to profane language. While you are free to express criticism or negative views, for the sake of members of the public participating on the call, please do not use profane language when making public comments to the board. Thank you, and now I turn it over to the board president.
Thank you so much, Ms. St. Clair. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the July meeting of the California Board of Psychology. Before we convene, I would like to advise all individuals observing or participating in the meeting that the meeting is being conducted consistent with the provisions of Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order N2920. Pursuant to this order, neither board member locations nor public meeting location are provided. Public participation may be through the WebEx link as described. If you have trouble getting on the call to listen or participate, please do call 916-574-7720. As shared by Ms. St. Clair, participants watching the webcast will be able to observe the meeting, and if you're interested in participation, please join through the WebEx function. With that out of the way, I would like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Gage, would you please call the roll to establish quorum?
My pleasure. Bernal. Is Ms. Bernal in attendance? Kasuga?
Here.
Cervantes?
Here.
Fu?
Here.
Harbsheets?
Here.
Phillips?
Here.
Rogers? Dr. Rogers? Dr. Tate?
Here.
And asking again for Bernal. And asking for Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Gage. I think quorum has been established with the roll call.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 2. The Board of Psychology protects consumers of psychological services by licensing psychologists, regulating the practice of psychology, and supporting the evolution of the profession. And as a part of today's welcome and in relation to the board mission, I really want to take the opportunity today to congratulate Dr. Mary Harbsheets, Vice President of the Board, and Dr. Stephen Phillips, Board President Emeritus, for their reappointment to the board. Governor Gavin Newsom reappointed them on June 15, 2020 for 4-year terms, and I'm absolutely thrilled that they'll continue their service to the board. Dr. Harbsheets has been a self-employed clinical psychologist since 1994 and a senior consultant and staff psychologist at Workplace Guardian since 2000. She was an adjunct faculty member in advanced law and ethics at Alliance International University from 2012 to 2018, a student services professional and adjunct faculty member at San Diego State University from 1990 to 1998, and a registered psychological assistant to Dr. Gary DeVos from 1992 to 1994. Dr. Stephen Phillips is a self-employed clinical and forensic psychologist since 2002. He has been a faculty member at the Wright Institute, Los Angeles since 2001, and has been an adjunct faculty member at Alliance International University since 1999. He was a psychological assistant to Dr. Elaine Schulman from 2000 to 2002. Both of their biographies are lengthy and storied, and you can find them on the governor's press release at gov.ca.gov. But really want to just congratulate them. And when we are all able to celebrate in person, I look forward to the ability to swear them in our ceremonial swearing in, but they've all taken their oath of office as required. Are there any board comments? Well, Dr. Hartshees or Dr. Phillips?
Just to thank you and happy to be reappointed.
And I can join in that. I also note that someone else received a reappointment to the board, Mr. Fu. So congratulations to Mr. Fu.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Is there additional board comment on this item? Seeing no board comment, is there a public comment on this?
This is the moderator. Thank you, Mr. Board President. I will open up the Q&A feature. And all right, the question and answer feature is now available. If you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions on the slide, and we will give you a moment to access that.
Mr. Fu, this is Dr. Kasuga.
Yes, Dr. Kasuga.
I just wanted to congratulate all three of you for your reappointment.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga. I really appreciate it.
All right. We do have some requests for public comment. The first individual has identified himself as Isaac Tates. Isaac, I will let you know when you have been unmuted. All right, Isaac, you've been unmuted.
Hello, my name is Isaac Tites. Nice to meet you all. I was curious, what are the current or recent changes that would affect out-of-state license seekers and early career psychologists, specifically with regards to the licensure exam, CEs, jurisprudence, and any hours and supervision requirements?
Thank you, Mr. Tice. I just want to clarify for that this public comment is for agenda item number 2, which is relation to the President's welcome. If there is public comment related to agenda item number 3, public comment on items not on the agenda, I'm happy to turn to that. So for the folks who've indicated they would like to make public comment, if you are making public comment on item 2, which is related to the President's welcome, please indicate through the Q&A box. If you do have public comments for items not on the agenda, which is item number 3, we will go ahead and turn to that item, and we will leave this Q&A panel box open for people to go ahead and do that. So seeing no comments for item number 2, I am going to go ahead and turn to item number 3, which I think Mr. Tites and other commenters would also like to make a comment on. So agenda item number 3 is for public comment on items not on the agenda. And before I invite the speakers to come forward, I would ask individuals making comments to not discuss the specifics, including names, as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Therefore, such discussions may create a conflict and interfere with the board's capacity to make necessary determinations. Board staff is available to speak to you individually and answer your questions outside of the hearing of board members if it's related to these matters that identify an individual person. The board is eager to listen attentively to your comments, and while there may be a desire to engage in further discussion with comments presented during this time, the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Although this may give the impression we are not being responsive, these procedures are critical to ensure the compliance with the Open Meetings Act and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. So I apologize for the confusion with regard to this public comment section. I would like to just turn it back over to Mr. Tights. And if you could kindly just repeat your question again for the benefit of our attendees, we can go ahead and try to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. I am looking for that individual on our list. All right. All right, so Isaac, you've been muted.
Thank you. So to repeat my question, and hopefully a question is available, I can ask a question during the comment section, and that question is, what are the current or recent changes, specifically for requirements, that are affecting out-of-state license seekers and early career psychologists, specifically with regards to hours, supervision hours, licensure exams, whether in person or online, CE requirements, and jurisprudence?
Thank you, Mr. Tights. Ms. Sorrick, would you be able to answer this question now, or would you like to answer this during the COVID or licensing report that Ms. Chung would be doing?
I can go ahead and answer this during the COVID update because I think a few of the items will be covered under that section.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Sorrick. Mr. Tights will go ahead and answer that question when we reach the COVID item, which is on item number, I believe, 4, actually. So this should be coming up quickly on the next item.
All right, this is the moderator. The next person requesting public comment is Michael Finlay. Michael, you've been unmuted.
Yes, I'd like to ask the board to add the discussion of joining PsychPAC in the future, since that was recently agreed upon with 16 states. I think that would be important to discuss for the board at a future meeting.
All right, this is the moderator, and the next person asking for public comment is George Hugh. George, I will let you know when you've been unmuted. Okay, George, you've been unmuted.
Hello, everyone. My question is with regard to folks not just coming from out of state, but coming from out of the country, specifically the rules regarding how training hours can be qualified, as I am in a difficult situation with a trainee in which the hours that I supervised for her have not been accepted by the board, and so I would like to seek some clarification about the specific regulation and rules pertaining to trainees who are seeking hours, qualified training hours outside of the country.
Thank you, Dr. Finley. And sorry, Ms. St. Clair. So seeing no further public comment on this item, on this, I will ask staff to have a PsychPAC update for our next board meeting. And I'm also going to ask that Ms. Sorrick, I understand that one of our public comments will have to sign off to see for an appointment and is asking about answers being available online or emailed to attendees. This webinar is being recorded, so it will be made available. But I think it might be helpful if there's no further board discussion or public comment to go ahead and turn to item 4 related to COVID. So is there any additional board discussion or board on items not on the agenda?
This is the moderator. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel then?
Yes, and I just want to make sure that Mr. George Hu got a chance to also answer to get the question.
Let me unmute him. George, you've been unmuted.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. I'm not sure that you guys heard my question before.
Was this about out of country and specifically your specifically the hours?
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I confused your comment with Dr. Finlay's question about SciPac, so I must have switched the order. So we will be answering that question on item 4, Dr. Hu.
Okay, and I'm actually calling not just with specific regard to post-COVID regulations, but just in general.
Understood. And so let me go ahead then and move to item 4, and we'll get all those questions answered.
Okay.
All right. Seeing no further board discussion or public comment, I'm going to turn to item number 4. And if I missed any board members, feel free to use the hand raising function that you see under the participants panel on your screen, where there's a raise hand function, and I'll get to you. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Sorrick for item number 4. And Ms. Sorrick, in your comments, if you could also address the questions that were posed during public comment for number 3, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Fu. Included in your meeting materials is the COVID-19 update, along with information about waivers, the different items about California Health Corps, and just wanted to update you all that since the meeting in April, the board at the last meeting approved a couple of the waivers to extend time for individuals that were running into training limitations on their months of being able to accrue hours in certain practice areas. And so that was approved at the last meeting. We have submitted some waivers, which are included in the meeting materials and the Excel sheet. 2 updates since the last meeting are for CE, and this will answer the question from Dr. Tates or Mr. Tates. There are 6 additional months to complete continuing education for purposes of renewal. So that has been approved by the department. And the other item is for face-to-face requirement. That waiver was extended until September 3rd. So those supervision requirements have been extended to allow for telesupervision. As for the license exam, the jurisprudence exam, there haven't been any changes as far as the requirements for the exam. Exam vendors are still offering both the national exam, the EPPP, and the jurisprudence or law and ethics exam here in California on a limited basis for a limited number of candidates. So that is the only thing that has been changed for that. So I just wanted to notify you all of those updates, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sorrick. Before I turn to board discussion, I want to just clarify that Dr. Hu's question related to out of country and his other questions. Ms. Chung will follow up with Dr. Hu. Ms. Stephanie Chung, who's our licensing manager, will go ahead and follow up with Dr. Hu. And so as a part of the follow-up, Ms. Chung, do you want to share what's the best way for that follow-up to occur?
Absolutely. I can correspond with email with Dr. Hu. I think I have your email inquiry that you have sent to the board a day or 2 ago, and then I will go ahead and respond to his inquiry in that way.
Thank you, Ms. Chung.
No problem.
So any board discussion on the coronavirus updates that Ms. Sorrick just shared? Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, I've got to remember to put myself on mute. Ms. Sorrick, as I understand it, there had been some correspondence that had inquired after extending the deadline on face-to-face supervision. I think they were asking for an extension through the end of the year, but as it stands right now, the face-to-face supervision requirement waiver is going to be through September 3rd at present. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional board discussion on this item? Dr. Kasuga?
Thank you, Mr. Fu. Ms. Sorrick, I was wondering if you can quickly relay again the summary of how these waivers are approved for the sake of the public members and public that are joining us today.
I'm sorry, the waivers that have been approved?
Yes. Can you relay a summary of how these waivers, the approval process for the waivers?
Oh, the approval process, yes. So the approval process for waivers, an organization can either go to the department and request a waiver, or they can, or the board can individually request a waiver. Our original waivers, which we submitted for items such as the face-to-face supervision and the withdrawal of application to exceed the 12-month requirement to withdraw the application. Those waivers were submitted by the board based on some of the inquiries that we received, or some of the staff concerns about the limitations on the requirements in a pandemic situation. So either it can come from an organization to the department, or come from the board to the Department of Consumer Affairs. Then it goes through a process of approval, which includes Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency review, as well as the Governor's Office review. Once the Governor's Office reviews it, then they get back to the Department of Consumer Affairs to make sure that the director has the authority to go ahead and waive that statutory or regulatory requirement during the emergency. So that's the current process.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you for the reminder of the process and how that works.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga. And as Dr. Phillips. So while Dr. Phillips gets unmuted, because I saw his hand go up.
Sorry. It takes some getting used to. I wanted to direct this to Ms. Sorrick. Ms. Sorrick, I noticed that there's some other waivers that, for instance, the period within which to accrue supervised professional experience that we previously extended by 6 months for people that came up on the limitation between March 4th and June 30th. Obviously, we're going past June 30th with the pandemic. Is any consideration being given to extending those waivers to be consistent with the length of the pandemic?
At this point, we have been notified that the department is not requiring requests for extensions. They're in constant review of all existing waivers, and they will let each program know if there is an extension that has been approved. So right now, the only ones that have been extended are the continuing education as well as the face-to-face supervision.
Okay. Is there any way we can flag for them ones that are of particular concern?
Yes, I can always follow up.
Yeah, I would just suggest maybe we want to look at those and see if there's some others that they should attend to.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I also just want to call attention and also express my thanks to the American Psychological Association, the Association of Psychology, Postdoctoral and Internship Centers, for their letters to the board with relation to this issue, as well as the submission to the board with different petitioners related in support of extending remote supervision in California. For the board members and for the public, this is included in our materials for you to be able to read the letters. But I really want to thank the participation of those organizations in submitting both their letters and the additional signatures from various stakeholders throughout the state. With seeing no further board discussion, I'm going to ask that Ms. Sinclair open the public comment portion for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. I have opened up the question and answer feature. If you are not seeing it in the lower right-hand corner of your field, please click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom middle of your screen, and then you should see it in your bottom right. Please click, I would like to make a comment, and then submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions on the screen, and we will give you a moment to access this feature. Thank you. All right, we have a few requests. It will begin with Victor Pacheco. Victor, I will let you know when you have been unmuted. All right, Victor, you've been unmuted.
Hi, my name is Victor Pacheco. I'm a psychologist with the California Department of Corrections, and I'm also representing 1,500 psychologists who work for the state for ASPPB Local 2620. And many of our people, 33% who are unlicensed, are running up against that 4-year deadline because they're unable to take the tests. And I heard mention that the ASPPB and the law and ethics tests are being offered in a limited capacity. So for those people right up against that 4-year timeline, to be delayed is pushing them over the 4 years and requiring them to get the 5th year catastrophic extension, which isn't always available. So I wonder if the board could consider an extension for those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. I will now move on to the next request for public comment, which is from Isaac Tayetz. So Isaac, I will let you know when you have been unmuted. Isaac, you've been unmuted.
Hi, this is Dr. Tights again. I wanted to clarify my earlier question as regards to either current waivers or plans for future accommodations for individuals seeking licensure, not that those who are looking to renew, which we heard earlier, but for those seeking to take the ASPPB, to take the jurisprudence exam. I know that in other locations, such exams are being made available online to reduce the risk of infection, but also increase the ability for people to become licensed and treat what will very likely be a wave of mental health issues that will come after the COVID wave or because of the COVID wave. In addition, some locations are changing or reducing their cutoff scores. And I was wondering what changes California has in mind to accommodate this new influx of psychologists seeking licensure.
Thank you, Dr. Tights. And our last request for public comment is from Michael Finley. Michael, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. All right, Michael, you've been unmuted.
Yes, we heard about the process of the Department of Consumer Affairs waivers, early on, we had COVID-19 affect our state differently, with the Bay Area being impacted initially, and then Southern California being impacted. And we saw the Board of Psychology initially issue waivers on their own, and then we've recently seen the Department of Consumer Affairs issue waivers, and we've seen the second wave of COVID-19 impacting the state differently. And I'm curious if the board would be willing to explain how you can issue waivers and what that process looks like, and what your plan is moving forward, as the state will be impacted differently, and the Department of Consumer Affairs waivers may not sufficiently address the issues of COVID-19, as each region of the state is going to be impacted differently.
I would like to, if I can, defer to Ms. Marks on the board's authority versus the department's authority in regards to waivers, if you can, Ms. Marks.
Thank you, Ms. Sorrick. There were certain areas that the department indicated that the board had authority to make adjustments with respect to reasonable time limits in which qualifications for licensure had to be met. And it was those specific areas that the board addressed back in April, I think it was. Is that right? And so the ability for the board to issue waivers is far more limited than the department. The department has been given the authority to issue waivers on a much broader scale, and it were those issues that the board requested of the department to address. I'm trying to remember specifically. I think the board had the authority. Quick track. I think it was with respect to the length of time or the period in which SPE could be accrued, and the length of time somebody could be registered as a psych assistant. I'm going off of memory here, but the basic answer is that the department said, board, use your authority in those instances where the regulations indicate you have the authority, and then the department addressed those other areas.
Ms. Marks, this is Sayron. I think one of the questions I had, and I really appreciate the question from all of our commenters, and I want to turn to Dr. Pacheco's question, because he did ask the question at the Ledge Committee meeting last month, and I think the answer from what you shared with us was that that's actually not even in the Business and Professions Code for the board, that it's actually separate in a separate code section that is outside of our board's jurisdiction. Can you clarify and comment on that, Ms. Marks?
Yes, I believe that Mr. Pacheco, who was the commenter before, raised that issue, and I think the 4-year limitation that he is referring to, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but the 4-year limitation on the ability of a person to be employed by CDCR without a license is within the penal code, and that isn't in the psychology licensing law. So neither the board nor the department would have any jurisdiction to address that limitation.
Thank you, Ms. Marks, for providing that clarification to Dr. Pacheco's question.
Mr. Sue, this is Dr. Harpsheets. Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I think that as a board, we have recognized that there are certainly individual circumstances that come up in general, but also especially in relation to the pandemic. And that if there are specific situations where people would like to request an extension of these time limits because of their individual situation that doesn't fall within a waiver, that the licensing committee, these requests can be made to the licensing group, and that the licensing committee does consider those and make recommendations to the board, who then would act on those. So it's just something to keep in mind too, that it's not as black and white as it might seem regarding time limits and waivers or not. That was it.
From our licensing guru. Thank you, Dr. Harpsheet. And Dr. Harpsheet reminds me that we should bring this back to the board discussion. And so I'm going to turn to Dr. Phillips, who I see his hand is raised there. And then we'll go to Dr. Kasuga afterwards.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. The 4-year limitation I think Dr. Pacheco is referring to, as spoken to by Ms. Marks, is not one that falls within the discretion of the licensing committee or the board. We don't have any control over the length of time within which people have to be employed by CDCR until such time as they receive their license. So I don't want to mislead Dr. Pacheco into believing that we have some authority there that we could wield, but we don't. Certainly with reference to time within which to accrue postdoctoral hours, there are waivers and there are also other circumstances that can be brought to the attention of the licensing committee and then the board where we can extend time, but I'm not sure that we can with respect to the items that fall within the penal code.
Thanks for the clarification, Dr. Phillips.
Dr. Kasuga?
Hello. I've been successfully unmuted. I just wanted to add on to what Dr. Harpsheet mentioned with regards specific requests for extensions that not fall under one of these waivers, that the licensure committee meeting is not meeting anytime soon. So I was just wondering if how that would be processed, or how that would be taken into consideration.
This is Dr. Harpsheet. We don't have a meeting scheduled. However, and Ms. Sorrick or Ms. Chung, please correct me if I'm wrong, if we do have a significant number of requests that we need to address, that we are able to schedule a meeting, a teleconference meeting. And please correct me if that's not correct. Thank you.
That is correct, Dr. Harpsheets. And I just wanted to mention to Dr. Pacheco that I would encourage him to inquire with CDCR if they have a similar waiver process to the Department of Consumer Affairs waiver process, so that that is something that can be considered.
Thank you, Ms. Sorrick. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Kasuga.
No worries. I just wanted to ask further clarifying questions with regards the threshold, because I'm imagining that given the pandemic, there's a lot of cases that are probably not falling under one of these waivers. And I'm just wondering, one, has the threshold been met of a lot of requests for extensions that we can foresee a meeting happening either in September or or sometime soon? Because I think that would be helpful in terms of kind of transparency.
I think this is Dr. Harpsheets. I think Ms. Chung can let us know the status of a number of requests, or give us a general idea. Since our meeting, we met on May 15th. So perhaps she can share with us requests, kind of what she's been seeing since then, because I think we're still in the waiver time frame, or yeah, no, I guess we've just passed, and that one hasn't yet officially been extended. So, Ms. Chung, could you help us out?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Hopcheats. We do receive extension requests, but from a very preliminary just overview of all the requests that come in, they do qualify one way or other for the waiver. So it's only a handful of cases that doesn't fall within those situations. And we will definitely keep the licensure committee abreast if situation changes, and so that the licensure committee can convene a teleconference meeting if necessary to review these cases that doesn't fall within the waiver.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Chung and Dr. Hopcheats.
And I would like just to point out, just to clarify, that the licensing committee has met twice this year already, and as Dr. Hopcheats aptly pointed out, can meet again for additional meetings this year as well. While public comment was closed when we returned to the board discussion, I do see a belated request. So I'm going to ask that, Madam Moderator, if you could go ahead and just open public comment, because I know technology challenges with the pandemic means it's difficult sometimes to get on board with the website. So if we can go ahead and just, as courtesy, provide public comment to be reopened for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. And we have a request from an individual identified as Joe Linder Crow. Joe, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. Hi, Dr. Joe Linder Crow with the California Psychological Association. I just wanted to go back to Dr. Pacheco's original question. I believe that he was not asking about, there's kind of two issues here that may be conflated. There is an issue about the waivers that, and you're correct, that's in the penal code, but I believe what Dr. Pacheco was referring to is the fact that the lack of availability of the APPP and the CPLE is having an impact on people whose waivers are about to expire. And I believe he was asking if the board had considered any accommodations since the exam has not been readily available. The fact that these folks have to wait is going to put them past the waiver. So that's a different question than whether the waivers need to be extended, if that's clear. So could someone comment on that about whether or not the board has considered the impact that the lack of availability of testing, and I believe this also may go to one of the earlier questioners' points.
Dr. Kusu, I see your hand raised. All right. Sounds like you. I'm going to ask Ms. Sorrick or Ms. Chung to answer Dr. Joe Linder Crow's question.
I will just try and address the, kind of more broad, and then I'll defer to Ms. Chung for follow-up on kind of the requests or how many, not how many, because that would probably be hard to articulate, but kind of identifying the need or a push for that. I will say that the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Office of Professional Examination Services has been in constant communication with the exam vendors. The Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards has also been in touch with the other exam vendor at the national level. They are offering as many exams as they safely can, and really it boils down to the safety of the candidates that are taking the exam, as well as the proctors that are administering the exam. So that is the situation with that. We're keeping an eye on how many people are able to exam And if there's any challenges, statutory or regulatory, to time limitations or needing to get that done earlier, I will defer to Ms. Chung on if we're running into problem areas with this in her view, based on requests that she might be seeing.
Thank you, Ms. Sorrick. We do see a handful of requests coming in, those candidates that were impacted by cancellations, and then we definitely work with them on a case-by-case basis to address their need so that they would get back on track. And that would be the extent of information I get on my end, and I don't see very many requests requesting like a blanket extension at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. A quick follow-up question. What are we able to get from our vendor what the testing capacity is? In other words, are 100% of slots for test taking being filled for any selected day, or is there or are they finding that for most appointments there's a 50% or 75% take rate for that? Or let me rephrase it differently. Have we heard from our vendor if there's excess capacity for any given time to take the exam, or lack of capacity?
Mr. Fu, I would have to follow up on that. I'm not sure the answer to that question offhand.
Thank you, Mr. I would be keen on just learning about that, largely because I think if there's a hypothesis that there's been a difficulty in accessing exams, if we can get from our vendor, some information about that, that would be really helpful just to confirm that hypothesis. Is there additional board comment or board discussion on item number 4? All right, seeing none, we will go to item number 5. So item number 5 is related to the dates and locations of the board and committee meetings, as well as committee updates, or with relation to committee assignments, I should say. One thing for the committee board meeting schedule is that we are on the board meeting schedule. It is set for an in-person in Sacramento. I think it's clear that this is a hope and a wish, and that we will continue to follow and monitor closely updates, whether if it's safe for all of us to be able to meet in person, and of course abide by local health or public health orders. I think meeting through this platform of WebEx may be the new normal until we get further clarity on public health instructions with relation to this pandemic. And I really do want to express my thanks to the board staff as well as DCA staff at Solid, who've helped facilitate us transition to this new normal as we experience this pandemic together. And there have been no changes to any committee assignments. Is there any board discussion on this item? Seeing no board discussion, is there, Madam Moderator, could you please open the public? Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Hartsheet.
I was just going to say that the ASPPB annual meeting is now going to be virtual also. I just learned that last week.
Thank you, Dr. Hartsheet, and may perhaps staff, when we have information about that, we can update the website to reflect that virtual conference that Dr. Hartsheet's referenced. Madam, if there's no further board discussion, I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to ask that Madam Moderator go ahead and open the public comment section for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. The question and answer panel has now been open. If you do not see it in the lower bottom right-hand corner of your screen, please click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom middle of your screen, and it should appear. We are also displaying instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment to access this feature. This is the moderator, and Mr. Board President, I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator.
Sure.
I don't see any further board discussion either based on the hand raising function, but if folks do, feel free to unmute yourselves. And hearing no further discussion from board members or staff, we'll turn to item number 6. A review of and possible approval of the April board meeting minutes. This item is in hand carry, so you'll have to access this item under hand carry meeting. So is there board discussion or edits on this item? And Ms. Sorrick, I know you had some, Ms. Marks, I think you had some comments, is that correct?
On the minutes?
Oops, I think I misread. Okay, apologies.
I don't think so.
So if there's no board discussion, is there a motion to approve the April board meeting minutes?
So move.
It's been
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Tate and seconded by Dr. Kasuga. Madam Moderator, could you please open the public comment section for item 6 with relation to the board meeting minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Board President. The Q&A panel is now available. If you would like to make public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists. Just a reminder, the comment field is not for you to type questions, simply to type, "I would like to make a public comment." If you do not see the feature in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, please click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom middle of your screen, and we are displaying instructions on the slide as well. Thank you. This is the moderator, and Mr. Board President, I'm seeing no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're now going to turn to item number 7, which is the budget report. Oh, excuse me. Let's go back to item number 6, back for board discussion. And if there's no further board discussion, can Mr. Gage, could you please call the roll for the motion on the table by Dr. Tate?
Certainly. Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
And Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gage. So we will now move to item number 7 for the budget report. Oh, excuse me, for public comment on the guidelines for the use of social media. So, well, actually, that's item number 8, I believe. I think the slide is incorrect. Item 7 is the budget report on our agenda. So I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Sorrick for the budget report. And this is also a hand carry item for board members. I mean, you can access it in the folder there for hand carry. So Ms. Sorrick, could you provide the budget report for item number 7?
Absolutely. Included in your meeting materials is the budget report. And I will go ahead and hand it over to Mr. McDermott, who is on the line. He is our budget analyst, and he will be able to provide the report. And then Mr. Skewis, I believe, is on the line to be available for any questions on the budget. Mr. McDermott? I see his name.
This is a moderator. Paul may need to go up to communicate at the top of his screen and select audio options.
I apologize for the technical difficulty. I can go ahead and get started until he's ready to proceed. Okay, so in the governor's 2019-2020 budget, the board has an appropriation of $5,921,000. In the governor's 2020-21 budget, the board has an appropriation of $6,423,000. Attachment A is going to be the budget report through fiscal month 11. And that will show the positive numbers and then the numbers that are exceeding the appropriated funds. However, as we have discussed in prior years, what is the most important is the amount at the bottom. We do bottom line budgeting, which means we might be able to take from one category to cover another category that might not be covered. So as of fiscal month 11, we're projecting a 0.38 reversion to go into the surplus, and that is $22,296. It has been a very tight year, but the board staff has been working diligently on monitoring all expenses that are going out and reviewing any possible discretionary funds. My hope is that the silver lining of our situation that we are in right now is that there will be some kind of cost savings by using the technology that is made available.
Can you hear me now?
Having to travel. Yes. Mr.
Right.
McDermott, I will hand it over.
Okay, sorry about that. We got it through.
Okay.
Okay, several things since our last meeting. I was listening to her, to Antoinette go through it, which is great, but I wanted to touch base since our last meeting. We had 4 major things that have happened since we last met. First of all, as tight as the budget was, as you knew, since we last talked, we made it to the end of the year. We walked through everything up until the last minute, about 4:45 on June 30th. We were going through purchase orders and contracts to make sure that everything was fine. And we actually, as about 4:45 on June 30th, we got everything in and we made it underneath the budget. Although it's a very slim margin, we still made it. If you go down to the very bottom on the report, what it'll say overall totals, you'll see that we have a surplus of about $23,000. That's a victory for us. We have a reversion of less 1%, but we still made a positive reversion this year. We did so by doing several things. We had a augmentation that hit our Attorney General and our Office of Administrative Hearings. We were able to walk through an augmentation on that. And with the help of Ms. Sorrick and Mr. Glass-Spiegel, we were able to work some budget items out that we can manage with. And that helped us get the bottom line into the positive category. So that was a victory for us. That's the main thing that I want to report on this for the budget for the end of the year, because we tracked this thing pretty diligently down the last 4 months of the year. So that is what you're looking at. Also is going to be the new projection sheet that we have, which is great because we now are getting more current reports from FisCal, and we're able to display it more accurately for you instead of saying we can't pull it out now. So you're going to have more current data from us as we go forward. I can thank Mr. Brian Skews and his team at OIS for able to put this whole document together, because this helps us a lot on what we're going to be doing going forward. With that said, as I told you in the last meeting, we're still going to be very diligent about what we're doing going into this fiscal year, and we'll be able to track it more currently for you. So there won't be any delay in getting you the information as there has been in the past. So the first one was we did make it. The second one, we made it through some augmentations through OAH and AG. And then on the second document, because it's a hand-carried document that you have, it's going to be the fund condition. And the fund condition, if you all have that, it'll be. I think the current year now we have it as 2021, and the budget year of 21-22. Several things with this on the major issue with this fund condition. As you know, we're still going through some unprecedented times, but we had a loan that was taken, was exercised by the state to the general fund from this fund to the tune of about $900,000, and that'll hit this current year. And this is something that was not in any of our control. This came down from the governor's office, and multiple boards and bureaus had a loan from their fund condition, from their fund, that they will use, and they are required to pay this back by the year 22-23. So you'll see on line item where it says transfers of fund, it'll say GF general fund loan per item. You'll see a negative $900,000, and then you'll see it returning back in 2 years at a positive $900,000. So that's a major issue there, but we'll be working through that and monitoring that, and the fund can sustain this. So the one thing I want to talk about on the fund here is the strength of the fund. If you look down at the months in reserves, we always talk it's strong if it has 6 to 12 months in reserves, and even with the general fund going out of $900,000, we're still within that 6 to 12 months at about 11 months here, 10.8. So that's good news. So good news is we made it. Good news, we still have a strong fund. We do monitor these funds to make sure that when they start trending negative, that we work with the board to address those issues, and we'll start working and addressing the issues when we have, as we have time going forward. So both the projection and the fund condition are in good shape right now. Again, we'll be tight on the budget next year again. We'll work through it, and we're strong on our fund. So I'm pretty confident we can do this again this year. It was a little stressful at the end, as everybody knows at the board, but we got it done. And then the third thing that Mr. Glass-Steagall asked me to supply was the budget for this year. We just went through a May revise, so I had to adjust that budget with all the May revise that came down from everything that we were going through. And on that May revise, you'll see the bottom line budget for that is roughly about $6.4 million, as opposed to the 5.9 we had. So we have about a $500,000 increase in our budget going next year. But I still will be very diligent and very accurate with the reporting, so that we don't have this issue going in the last quarter of the year, and be very happy with that. You do have 2 other documents that we do supply. One is going to be discretionary funds and expenditures. That is just a capture of all these documents that makes it a little bit easier to read. I get into the weeds on this stuff so I can see what's going on, and the board has asked me to supply just a broad picture of what's going on. So the numbers will match. You'll see some graphs, and you'll see just discretionary income and discretionary expenditure. But all in all, at 5:01, I was happy. I'm still happy now, and we're going to start it all over again now. We'll have more information for you starting the second month of the year and move on from there. But everything looks good now, and I'm pretty much happy with where we are. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Are there any questions from board members or staff on, this is, by the way, the budget report, item number 7. comment for social media will be item 8. So are there any questions from the board for Mr. McDermott? Dr. Harps, please.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you, and I feel encouraged that we will be getting clearer information. Sounds like perhaps more timely, maybe even more accurate information, if I understood correctly. And I think that that's a relief. And thank you for your diligence in helping us do this and paying such close attention.
Well, you're welcome, and these new reports are going to take a lot of stress off and a lot of worrying. So we're very happy with it and excited that we have something more to give you. And just one thing I wanted to touch here real quickly, as I got down towards the end of the quarter, end of the year, the one thing that did not stop, and I tracked it every week, was the enforcement side of the expenditures. When it came to Attorney General, it came to Office of Administrative Hearings, when it came to the subject matter experts, that did not slow down. So the goal and the ability to keep enforcement going was actually still going on as we were going towards the end of the year. So that did not slack off.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott, for that clarification. I don't see any further board discussion at this moment, so I'm going to ask Madam Moderator to go ahead and open the public comment section for the budget report.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. I have now opened the Q&A feature. If you cannot see it, please click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom middle of your screen, and then you should see it to the right, lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions on the slide, and we'll give you a moment to access the feature. This is the moderator, and I see no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you.
So I'm going to return this back to the board. Is there additional board discussion or questions for Mr. McDermott? No further questions or comments. I will make one comment, which is, I think, just for clarification, as always, as we've done in the past, is that notwithstanding everything that has been shared, I want to point to Mr. McDermott's information related to non-discretionary budget versus discretionary budget, and the core functions of the operations of the board as it relates to enforcement and licensing, et cetera, are all part of the non-discretionary budget. And so those are pieces that we have focused our efforts in maintaining and supporting. And I just wanted to highlight that and stress that as we continue to manage the budget situation for this fiscal year and future fiscal years. Mr. McDermott, any final words for us? All right. So seeing no further board discussion, staff comment, what we will do is actually we will take a break for approximately 5 minutes and return at 11:15. And so what you can do is the WebEx function will keep open. We will return at 11:15 to take up item number 8, which is related to ASPPB guidelines for social media. The board will be on break until 11:15. Good morning, everyone. We're resolving a quick technical issue and we'll return as promised. Just give us a couple more minutes. Good morning, everyone. We're resolving a quick technical issue on our end. We'll be returning shortly. All right, we'll go ahead and return and reconvene for the board meeting. So we are currently on item number 8 with regard to ASPPB's guidelines for social media. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Sorrick. Or excuse me, to Mr. Thomas. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you. So the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards created a social media task force to develop guidelines for the use of social media by psychologists in practice and by psychology regulatory bodies. Back on April 29th, ASPPB released its draft guidelines for consideration and comment. The draft guidelines are attached to the memo in your meeting materials, and the action requested is to review the draft guidelines and provide feedback, suggestions, and/or alternative ideas to be provided back to ASPPB.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Is there board discussion on this item specifically with regard to submitting feedback to these draft guidelines? Mr. Moderator, would it be possible for you to open public comment? Oh, excuse me. Sorry, real quickly. I think Dr. Harsh has unmuted herself.
I also have comments too, Sarah, and my hand is up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't notice. All right, so we'll go to Dr. Harsh and to Dr. Phillips.
So I'm wondering, are you looking for a board member to work with Mr. Thomas to compile feedback regarding comment to submit back to ASPPB? I was trying to understand.
Sure. I think I was, for this first part of the conversation, really is just to hear from board members about any comments they may have about these draft guidelines. I suspect Dr. Phillips may have some. And from there, determine as a board if we want to submit draft comments and to your point, ask a board member to work with Mr. Thomas to submit those comments based on what is discussed by board members and during public comments. So I'm going to go to Dr. Phillips then. Dr. Phillips?
I guess the first question I have is for Ms. Marks. I know that we have authority to promulgate regulations in the context of telepsychology. Would these social media guidelines fall within the area of our discretion to promulgate regulations?
I think the board would have some authority in terms of making some determinations about interpretations about what is unprofessional conduct. So if we looked at I think 2960, which is the general section on grounds for action and unprofessional conduct, that might give you the authority to promulgate regulations that say unprofessional conduct and also includes violations of the ASPPB guidelines as incorporated by reference here, something along those lines. Is that along the lines of what you're considering?
Yeah, that was very helpful. I know that we promulgated regulations or proposed regulations in telepsychology. I guess that was related more to a specific grant from the legislature. But if I'm hearing you correctly, this would be a much more general discussion that relates to unprofessional practice.
That is the tone of my comment, yes, because as I look at some of these standards that they're talking about, or some of the guidelines that the draft is talking about, they are broader than telepsychology. As best as I can tell, they're about the use of social media and other things that I think are broader than telepsychology.
Yeah, they've also incorporated text messages in there, so it becomes a little confusing as to where to draw the line. But it sounds like we at least have a general charge to take a look at this area.
I think you could. I believe I saw Mr. Tom Plays on the call as well, so he could speak to what would be the board's authority to take action on a violation that may be in the guidelines, but not specifically in regulation. I think the board has alleged just some general unprofessional conduct, and then you would get expert opinion to say, yes, this conduct is considered unprofessional conduct, and they may use the ASPPB guidelines as part of their expert opinion. So if you did not have regulations, there may be some way of looking at some of these guidelines and saying, yeah, that if a licensee engaged in that conduct, we would still want to take action. I'm not quite sure if that, sort of an adjunct of your question or not, Dr. Phillips.
That is helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Cervantes?
Hi, I have a question on this item for the staff. Do we have any? Do we receive Do we receive complaints about inappropriate use of social media? And if we do, what kind of, do they fit some pattern? Have we been able to resolve those issues with our current policies?
Hi, this is Sandra, and we have received complaints regarding the use of social media, Facebook, Twitter. It might be an unprofessional comment that is made using maybe disrespectful language, advertising. If we're going to include email and text messages, yes, we've received complaints. Those usually are related to maybe some boundary issues, maybe even some type of sexual misconduct related complaint. All of the complaints, as you know, Mrs. Cervantes, are investigated. Any case that is going to be referred over to the Attorney General's office is going to be looked at by a subject matter expert. Because if we were to move forward with formal discipline, we would need an expert to opine as to whether or not there has been a departure from the standard of care, and that individual would need to testify if the case went to hearing. So we currently have a mechanism in place to deal with unprofessional conduct. And again, I don't have a number, unfortunately, of how many complaints we receive regarding social media use, but the board has received complaints.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Harb-Sheets. I think they're very thorough, and I don't think the profession has, if I can recall, has any clear directions. I mean, there's some directions if you're going to use it. There's some direction on how people should use it in terms of making informed consent. But I think that there's a real usefulness here. One of my questions would be for Ms. Marks. ASPPB is going to put out these guidelines. How would they be useful to us, or in terms of our own enforcement process if a specific complaint was made about inappropriate use of social media?
If the board were to, say, promulgate regulations that incorporate the ASPPB guidelines by reference and indicating that violations of the guidelines is considered unprofessional conduct, it then allows the board's expert to be, I think, a little, it provides them a pathway for their opinion a little bit easier. As I said before, if it's not specifically used by the board and incorporated into your regulations, it does not stop the board from obtaining an expert opinion in the way that Ms. Monterrubio described, and an expert could still say, it has now become part of the profession to make sure that people use, for example, their social media in a way that's not demeaning to the profession, whatever would be the conduct that somebody complains about. So I would want to make sure before they're incorporated, I would want the board to make sure before, if the board would consider that they are very clear guidelines. It says what to do, what not to do, so that a licensee would know, well, you've incorporated these guidelines, I still need to know what I can and can't do. They said there are ways in which the conduct itself can be addressed, and some of it could be addressed in other ways. For example, if there is some kind of sexual misconduct, but it took place via some social media, I don't know that you need a guideline that says don't use social media to engage in sexual misconduct. I think you've got already social misconduct as a basis for discipline, and how it occurs may not necessarily be the important thing. So I think some of the complaints would be handled very much the way the board already handles them. You already have some clear indication that the conduct is unprofessional. It might be some other areas that these guidelines address. Comments on social media that is, as Ms. Monterubio was saying, may be sort of unprofessional, or if you posted a video of yourself engaging in some kind of unprofessional behavior, something along those lines that isn't specifically covered under the current laws and regs.
I guess I think about the situation where a psychologist is on LinkedIn, and because they have had some kind of email, let's say communication with a client separately from LinkedIn, and since we know LinkedIn has some computer that whether or not you seem to give access to your contacts, this computer manages to get them, and all of a sudden that, they have that whole thing, people you may know, I'm not sure their lingo, but something like people you may know, and and now your client shows up on that, and the client feels that is a violation of confidentiality because other people have found that. I mean, I think that's not an unusual kind of situation. And so my thought is, I heard what you said, that a board expert could reference these kinds of guidelines to reflect that these are guidelines that the profession could use to determine what is appropriate use of social guidelines. So that's my thought, based on what you're saying, that they could be useful in that way.
If you mean that they could be useful even whether or not the board somehow adopts them, I think that I think it would depend on how an expert goes about forming his or her opinion. Mm-hmm. So, this might be one resource that an expert would look at and say, this has become part of the, part of the profession. This has become, this is now commonly accepted as conduct that might be considered unprofessional, etc. So the board, I think an expert may use these guidelines in the way they already come up with their opinions. Mr. Tomplay may be able to speak about that, or Ms. Monterubio may be able to address that a little bit more specifically. But I think that if the board wants to be very clear that guideline number 1, don't tweet about XYZ. Truthfully, I'm just making that up, obviously. if you wanted to be very clear that the board says that's unprofessional conduct, then it would be more clear to promulgate regulations that adopts that. And if not, then any complaints would be continue to get handled as they are now. And as I said, these guidelines may be very relevant in forming an expert opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Marks. Real quickly, I'm going to jump in here. I know Dr. Harpsheets, you may have some follow-up questions, but I just want to ask if the moderator could please have Mr. Josh Temple as a panelist so that he can unmute his lines at will. Because I suspect this is something that Mr. Temple will have opinions on. So while the moderator is going to have Mr. Temple as a panelist, excuse me, Dr. Phillips and Dr. Kasuga, I see your hands, and Dr. Harpsheets, I know I jumped in so that we can have Mr. Temple on the phone.
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm done.
Okay. Dr. Phillips and Dr. Kasuga, would you like to hear from Mr. Temple first, or would you like to make comments first?
I can make a comment. I don't know if it's going to impact what Mr. Temple has to say. I guess, first of all, we have seen some social media, as it's defined in these guidelines, show up in enforcement cases that have actually made it all the way to the board. Certainly, text messaging has been one thing. I am also aware that there are certain issues that come up fairly often in practice because people are not quite sure how to proceed with it. For instance, the question whether to Google a patient, which I think generally is considered to be very bad practice and a violation of their boundaries and their privacy. But I think there are useful things that happen here in the guidelines, and I can certainly see their utility to an expert where they're looking at use of social media. I don't know that we want to go any further than that in terms of somehow formally incorporating them into our regulations for purposes of the standard. I think what they are useful in doing is kind of helping us determine what best practices are, or what at least what the standard of care is relative to conduct. But as with so many other guidelines and other documents referred to by our experts, I think it's best left to the experts to determine what's the appropriate, or what they believe is the standard for purposes of the profession. So I think they're really interesting. I think they're very well thought out. I think they cover a lot of subject matter. I don't know that we would just, if we're going to have comments on this guidelines, I don't know that it's appropriate really for us to delegate that to one board member unless we have a discussion about what those specific comments would be. So that's all I have to say on that subject. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I'm going to go to Dr. Kasuga, then go to Mr. Temple. So, Dr. Kasuga?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on the same sentiments that Dr. Harpsheets and Dr. Phillips said earlier. I think that there's a lot of helpful information here. Specifically, I like the informed consent guidelines and the competent practice via telepsychology. I think that in terms of enforcement, there is usefulness in certain areas that there is currently a vacuum, wherein there is client harm, but there is unclear kind of like direction of what to do. I mean, I can just, as an example, there are some informed consent things that they've mentioned that is really important for telepsychology, but is not laid out in our current regulations. So having some guidelines on best practices will be really helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga. Mr. Temple, you've been very patient. Thank you for offering your opinions as our liaison.
You're welcome, Mr. Fu. Thank you for having me. I've got very little to add, but I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions. But I think what Ms. Marks and Ms. Monterrubio and Dr. Phillips said, I just want to echo that. Answer the question is, how useful would these guidelines be in our enforcement cases? I think very useful, and just as guidelines, not even incorporating them as regulations. These would arm our experts with specific guidance in cases of misconduct that happen to involve social media, right? So when we work with experts on cases, we always want to find secondary sources that back up or inform their opinion. And guidelines like this are exactly what we need. And so we could even encourage the quicker adoption of these guidelines by our experts who are opining on cases. By, for example, at our expert trainings, we could direct them to these guidelines so that in cases where there's social media, encourage the experts to consult the guidelines and incorporate those in their opinion. But really, it's unprofessional conduct is most specifically defined by the expert in a given case. So the expert will say what the standard of care is. And if there's been a violation of that, we have unprofessional conduct. So not necessarily any need for any further regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. Ms. Cervantes, I see your hand up, and I also see Dr. Kusuga's hand up. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Cervantes and then to Dr. Kusuga.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's an old one.
Okay.
I don't. Sorry.
No, it's all good. And I see that Dr. Kusuga has also removed the figure. That Mr. Moderator, go ahead and open up this for public comment, and then we'll return it back to the board for discussion for next steps.
I have gone ahead and opened up the Q&A panel over on the side. So if you need to make a comment, you can go ahead and choose to use the instruction slide on your left. It will have the Q&A panel there. You'd have to have your participant panel open. Type in, I would like to make a comment, and make sure that you're sending it to all panelists, and I'll give you a few moments to do that. I see that we have one comment currently from Elizabeth Winkleman. I will go ahead and unmute your microphone. Ms. Winkleman, your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. This is Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman from the California Psychological Association, and I just wanted to say that I agree with the comments made by Dr. Phillips, other board members, and Mr. Temple that it would be useful, these guidelines would be useful to help inform the standard of care, but that I don't think that a formal adoption by the board would be necessary or make sense, or formal regulations. And I also wanted to add, this is the kind of resource that we would also share with our members to help inform them, and that it would be useful in terms of general education as well, and helping people to develop their own ways and refine their own ways of managing social media.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman. Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I think Dr. Jo Linda Crow may want to make comment. I
don't have something here. Do you want me to unmute her microphone from the attendee list?
Yes, could you unmute Dr. Jo Linda Crow's line, because it seems like she may have a comment but may not be able to.
She just added no comment. That was earlier.
Ah, okay. Thank you so much.
Those are the comments that we had currently. So if there are no further comments, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And I want to clarify, Mr. Moderator, thank you so much for guiding us through this. And apologies if our titles aren't reflected when we call on you. If you want to be sure that we call on you with your doctor title, for the future meetings that we may be doing, you can always insert your letters, like a PsyD or PhD, or even if you want in front of your first name, you can put doctor, so that we can make sure we recognize your profession and leadership. Based on what we're seeing here, we may not necessarily have access to that, and so we may make mistakes on our way for that. Dr. Phillips, you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess I want to go back to the original inquiry from ASPPB. Do we have any comments on the guidelines? I've had an opportunity to read through them, as I'm sure other board members have. I honestly didn't have the time to go through line by line and parse it out. Do we have a significant interest on the part of board members in providing specific comments? All of the earlier comment from Dr. Harp-Sheets. And I'm not sure what period of time we have within which to make these comments. And if there is a substantial period of time within which to make comments, it might be worth delegating it to the appropriate committee, whether that be telepsychology or enforcement, or I don't know where else it would go, but to have them take a look at the guidelines, or is there no great sentiment about doing that, in which case we can just move on?
This is Dr. Harp-Sheets. I think I also had a chance to read through them and feel that they are very thorough. I have a guess that the deadline date to comment has probably passed, but I don't necessarily see a need to go through line by line and make specific comments about the information presented. I just think it's useful to know it's there, appreciate that they've done that. And maybe that's, if we're going to respond to them, maybe that's all we need to say, is my general feeling.
Thank you, Dr. Harp-Sheets. Ms. Stewart, do you have clarification on what Dr. Harp-Sheets and Phillips just raised about deadlines and also next steps?
We are actually past the technical deadline. I did ask for additional time to provide feedback, which ASPPB said they would be happy to provide that so that at the board meeting we would be able to discuss this item. So this is a short turnaround as far as that goes. We were in between meetings when they sent out the request for comment. And then the deadline was right before this meeting, so I just asked for a little extra time. I would echo the sentiments that Dr. Harp-Sheets mentioned. If the board members do not have any specific feedback to provide, since the board did send a letter asking for ASPPB to put something like this together, and that was in response to the nursing regulatory membership organization that did a similar guidance, and that was a video that we showed at a board meeting as well as an outreach meeting, that we just acknowledge their efforts and that we look forward to the finalization of the guidelines. I think that would be a nice gesture if there isn't specific feedback that the board members have on the guidelines.
Thank you, Ms. Sorrick. And so I think, and Dr. Kasuga, I see your hand's been raised. I'm just going to make a quick comment here. I think if there aren't any objections, and I don't think we need a motion on this, but if there aren't, so I look to Ms. Marks to clarify that. But if there aren't any objections to what Ms. Sorrick just said, I think we can go ahead and send that acknowledgement letter of saying thank you for listening and for sharing this guidance with us. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Kasuga, and if you have objections to what Ms. Sorrick has suggested, please also raise your hand and we'll get you unmuted. Dr. Kasuga.
Yeah, I just have one quick comment, and this doesn't have to be shared with ASPPB, but it's with regards this whole document. And I agree it's very thorough, But what I've been just thinking when I was reading these guidelines is the omission of the acknowledgement that there's a discriminatory nature of the use of technology with regards to access to care. So like when like psychologists have to telepractice, there are people that are not able to access the same level of contact with the provider. So I just think that given what is going on in our communities right now and the disparity between access to healthcare, I think that it's still under it's still not being talked about and under addressed. So I just wanted to kind of say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kisuga. Dr. Phillips?
I actually, Cheryl having brought up that issue, which I had not focused on, I think that actually would be a useful thing to mention. I think somewhere in this document there should be an acknowledgement about access to social media being situation dependent and often dependent on socioeconomic background. So it may be a comment we could add to the letter without making a huge issue of it, but I do think it should be brought to their attention. So many of the things that we do are premised on an assumption that people have the same access to social media, to computers, to smartphones, which may not be true for either the patients / clients or the providers because of their particular situation and what communities they're within. So it would probably be an appropriate thing to be acknowledged, particularly given the current social conversation. So I would actually be in favor of including that in the letter.
I would love that. Thank you, Dr. Phillips.
So if I may make a suggestion, well, first of all, Ms. Marks, we don't need a board motion for this letter, correct?
I think it's not a bad idea because you are expressing the collective view of the board. So I think that would be advisable since it is going out to the public.
Understood. All right. If that's the case, Dr. Phillips, I see your hand up. I was going to suggest that the motion may look along the lines of delegating to Ms. Sorrick, or to board staff, I should say. And may I suggest working with Dr. Kisuga, since she was the person who raised this issue on the letter for language. Dr. Phillips?
I so move.
I second. And I accept. I accept the delegation.
All right, we have a motion. Let me just clarify for everyone. We have a motion that would delegate to board staff to work with Dr. Kisuga on a letter to the ASPPB with regard to thanking them for these guidelines and for also acknowledging the need to discuss the disparities of access, of equitable access to technology and social media. My understanding, and we have a motion by Dr. Phillips and seconded by Dr. Kisuga. My understanding, Mark, is that because there's a motion on the table that there hasn't been opportunity for public comment, we have to return to public comment. Is that correct?
Yes, once there is a motion, the public gets to speak directly to the motion.
Perfect. All right. So with that, Mr. Moderator, could we reopen public comment for this item so that the public has the opportunity to comment on this motion?
The public comment box has been opened. Instructions are on the screen.
All right.
At this time, I do not see any public comments. Would you like me to close the public comment box?
Yes, please, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Is there additional board discussion on the motion before us? All right, seeing Dr. Kasuga, I see your hand raised. Do you have additional comments for this item? Oh, okay. So with that, Mr. Gage, could you please call the roll on this item?
Certainly. Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Gage. So we're about to hit noon. So I think what I'm going to suggest is that the board go ahead and take up under items 9, and we'll go to about 12:30. And at 12:30, we'll take a 20-minute break, come back and go till about 2, and carry over any items past, any items that we don't get to by 2 p.m. to tomorrow. So if there aren't any objections to that by board members or staff on that procedural question, and I don't see any hands raised, we'll go ahead. Dr. Harpsheets, as our chair of the licensing committee, I'll turn this over to you for item 9, and we'll go to about 12:30 and take a break if we don't finish by then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we had a number of requests for extensions. So in item 9A, we will first talk about the extension request for the 72-month registration period limitation for registered psychological assistants. So PSB number 1 had 7 various psychological assistant registrations beginning in 1998. This person has completed hours and was requesting and have originally been granted an 18-month extension in the past. Would like a further extension. The licensure committee voted to deny the request as the person has been approved to take the exam. Now, will we ask for a motion and then have discussion? Is that the best way to approach?
I think so, Dr. Harpsheet.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the request for extension consistent with the recommendation from the licensing committee.
I'll second.
Okay. Would this be a time for discussion? Any discussion?
And I'm sorry, please, who seconded?
Tate?
Thank you.
Any discussion? Now, is this the time we would open up to public discussion, or is this simply board discussion?
Mr. Moderator, could you go ahead and open the public comment section for Dr. Harpsheet's request?
I have opened the public Q&A and the instructions are on the screen.
I don't see any, and I don't see any public comment, questions. Could we please call for the vote?
Certainly. Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. PSB number 2, this person was scheduled to take the PPP in March. the exam was canceled due to the pandemic. This person did fall under the waiver, so the registration was extended to October, but would like an additional 6-month extension due to a chronic health condition. And the committee voted to approve this person's request for an additional 6-month time frame. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the licensure committee recommendation for PSB number 2?
So moved. This is Seiron.
Second?
I second. This is Dr. Kasuga.
Okay, any discussion? Time for public comment. Could the moderator please open the public comment box?
Public comment is currently open and the instructions are on the screen. We'll give a moment for them to enter their comment.
I see no comments. Could we please, could we call for the vote, please?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, PSB number 3 had a delay in obtaining the person's doctoral degree due to health and family issues, and additionally fulfills a caregiver role. This person less than 1 year ago did obtain their doctoral degree, hopes to finish their hours by the end of the year, and requested an 18-month extension for to obtain the postdoctoral hours. The committee voted to approve this PSB number 3's request for the additional 18 months. Anyone like to make a motion, please?
So moved. This is Seiron.
Second?
Second from Tate.
Any discussion? Could we please open the public comment box?
Q&A is currently open and the instructions are on the screen. We'll give everyone a moment to enter their comment.
I don't see any comments. Could we please call for the vote?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, PSB number 4 requested a 6-year extension. The person has applied and approved to take the exam. This person does qualify for a COVID waiver. However, due to medical and family issues stated, the committee felt justified in approving an additional 6 months extension. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Public comment open, please.
Public comment is open. The instructions are on the screen and we'll give them a moment to enter their comments.
Okay, I see no public comment. Please call for the vote.
And just for clarification, I heard Seiron, you called for the motion and then also seconded. Could I get the order of the motion and the second there?
I think Ms. Cervantes moved the motion and I seconded.
Okay. Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, PSB number 5 is requested a 1 to 2 year extension. This person has taken the EPPP several times, not yet passed. The committee chose to deny the request and would like the person to proceed with the licensure process. Somebody please make a motion.
So move. This is Tate.
Second, Phillips.
Any discussion? Please open for public comment.
Public comment box has been opened. It's in the lower right-hand corner. And if you would like to make a comment, instructions are on the screen.
Okay, I see no public comment. Is that a public comment or is that just background?
That might be background. I don't see any comments that have been written in.
Okay. Could we please call for the
I actually had a request, Madam Chairman. The language is varied in the way you presented it. The licensing committee, as I understand it, has the authority to make a recommendation to the board. They can vote to deny or grant.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can just be careful about our language about that until we have regulatory change, I'd appreciate it. Because I think at this point, it's only up to the board whether to grant or deny.
Correct. I thought I said at the beginning, but thank you for the reminder. So
Thank you so much.
Okay. So PSB number 6 was previously granted a 2-year extension and has accrued all experience toward licensure.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we didn't actually call roll on that one.
Oh, we didn't, sorry.
PSB 5, that's okay.
So we need to call please call for the vote on PSB number 5.
Correct. Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, PSB number 6 was previously granted a 2-year extension, has accrued all experience toward licensure, has taken the EPPP and not yet passed. This request was denied and the licensure committee asks the board to approve their denial of this request. Did I say that correctly, Dr. Phillips?
I'm sorry, I don't want to.
I think it's all purely in reference to a recommendation to deny.
Okay, so the licensure committee makes a recommendation to deny this request, recommendation to the board. Thank you for that clarification.
And thank you for putting up with my obsessive processes.
That's good to know. Let's see, any discussion? Oh, we didn't have a motion. Should we have a motion for PSB number 6?
I have a motion to take action consistent with the recommendation of the licensing committee.
Okay, a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion? Public comment?
Public comment box has been opened and there will be instructions on the screen. If you would like to make a comment.
Okay.
I do not see comments. Would you like me to close the public comment box?
Yes, please do. Please do. And please call for the vote.
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
And Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. PSB 7 requested an 18-month extension as this person recently completed their doctoral degree and needs time to accrue postdoctoral hours. Could we have a motion to accept the recommendation of the licensing or licensure committee? Waiting for a motion.
So move. This is Tate.
Okay. Second? Can I second it?
Second.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, could please open the public comment box?
Public comments have been open in the lower right-hand corner. If you would like to make a comment, instructions are on the screen. I do not have any comments that have come in. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel box?
Yes, please do. Please call for the vote.
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Herbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. We will move on to 9B. These were requests to extend the 30 consecutive month limitation to accrue 1,500 hours of postdoctoral supervised experience. PSY number 1 is requesting a 10-month extension to accrue the full postdoctoral hours. This person had not prepared the documentation of supervision hours correctly at the beginning of supervision, so needed to do some additional hours. The licensure committee is recommending to the board that we grant this that the board grants this request. Someone please make a motion.
So move. This is Tate.
I second. This is Dr. Kasuga.
Okay. Any discussion? Please open the comment box.
Q&A panel has been opened in the lower right corner. Instructions are on the screen. We'll go ahead and wait for you to make your comment. There are no comments listed. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And call for the vote.
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Herbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. PSY number 2, this applicant is requesting a 7-week extension. The person was in a car accident and needed extra time for the treatment of their injuries. The licensure committee is asking the board to grant this request as recommended by the licensure committee. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second, Phillips.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who? I couldn't hear the motion, please.
Cervantes.
Thank you.
Moved.
Any discussion?
Actually, I have a discussion I'd like to have. It seems like in most of the cases where people are claiming a medical condition of one sort or another, whether it be pregnancy or neurological problem or a car accident or we have some kind of medical confirmation of that. And may be wrong, but in this particular instance, all I saw, I believe, was a letter from the petitioner.
Let me look here, because we do frequently get letters from physicians, and I just want to look through this. And Ms. Chung, if you also remember this particular one, please feel free to jump in.
Thank you, Dr. Harpcheets. I believe the licensure committee, when they review these requests during closed session, they were provided more detailed information because they're more sensitive in nature. So that's why we didn't include those information here for the board meeting. But the licensure committee did review those documentation whenever necessary.
Okay. Ms. Chung, it's just that they're in the package we got. In some instances, we got the letters from, or the medical documentation. In some instances, we didn't get the medical documentation. Is there a distinction you make as to which we'll get medical documentation about and which we won't?
I think in previous board meetings that the board decided they don't want to see the medical information per se regarding the packet. But if there's a change in direction, we can include that in future.
I guess what I'm saying is, at least as to some of the earlier ESBs we looked at, there was medical documentation provided. So I'm confused as to how the distinction's made, or if we need to be more consistent about it.
I see. Thank you for the clarification. I'm sorry that if there was a medical documentation included in the other part of the materials, there shouldn't be any.
Okay.
Dr. Phillips, I think I'm looking through in this documentation, I think we have a letter from the supervisor who gave a lot of detailed information, it seems like. But this might be actually a doctor. It seemed like a supervisor, but he's been looking at some detailed, and I think this is for PSB or PSY2. Do you see that on page 129 of the combined packet? Or it starts on 128. Are you looking for that, Dr. Phillips?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh.
I do see it. I see it for some and not for others.
Okay.
For instance, where there was somebody applying based on a maternity leave.
Uh-huh.
When I sat on the licensure committee, we would see things like a birth certificate, which is a simple thing to provide. Now, maybe we decided not to include birth certificates, but what I'm saying in general, I guess, as a general issue is I'm seeing some letters from doctors on some matters and no letters from doctors on other matters.
Okay, you're making a general comment.
Yeah, it's more of a general comment. If that's being filtered out for the benefit of maintaining the privacy of the petitioner, I can certainly understand that, but I don't understand why it's observed in some instances and not in others. So I guess it's a plea for consistency.
I think that's a great point. I think that at our next licensure committee meeting, that's something would be good for us to address and try to develop some guidelines regarding that.
That'd be great. And if you could bring them back to the board so we could discuss them, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. That would be excellent. Ms. Chen, could you please make a note that we have that on our next agenda?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we have just had some discussion on the motion regarding PSY number 2, the 7-week extension request due to injuries from a car accident. Any other discussion? Okay. Can we open that up for public comment?
The public comment box has been opened in the lower right-hand corner, and there are instructions on the screen, and we'll give you a moment to enter your comment. At this time, I do not see any comments listed. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And can we call for the vote, Mr. Gage?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. PSY number 3 is requesting a 17-month extension due to a maternity leave timeframe and reduced work hours upon this person's return from the maternity leave. The licensure committee is recommending that the board grant this request. Could we have a motion?
So move. This is Tate.
Second?
Okay. One.
Looking for a second.
I second. This is Fu.
Okay. Any discussion? Will we please open the public comment box?
The Q&A panel have been opened. It's open in the lower right-hand corner, and there will be instructions on the screen that you can follow. We'll give you a moment to enter your comments. At this time, I do not see any public comments. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And Mr. Gage, could you call for the vote?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving to number 9C. This is a request to submit, this is a submission of a supervision agreement plan for supervised professional experience in a non-mental health services setting. This person plans to practice in a school psychology setting. Will be doing teaching, research, consultation, and assessment, and has submitted an alternate plan. The licensure committee saw this as providing a useful service to consumers that introduces them to the profession of psychology. This person will be supervised by a licensed psychologist who should ensure that the trainees' activities are not mental health related. The licensure committee recommends to the board that the board grant this or approve this supervised professional experience plan. Could I have a motion?
So moved by Fu.
Second?
Second by Tate.
Any discussion?
Yeah, this is Phillips. In looking at what she's going to be doing, a lot of it is a more academic function. I don't, I have no objection to. And actually, it's a very thorough plan of supervision as far as I'm concerned, except she's going to be supervising people providing, for instance, assessment services. Are we considering that a non-mental health function?
As I recall, when we discussed it, and Mr. Fu and Dr. Tate, please jump in if you remember this, that the supervision itself was not an area we're concerned about, that the type of supervision was more in a consultative kind of nature, and that there was additionally this licensed psychologist providing the supervision around the assessment. Mr. Fu and Dr. Tate, do you remember it that way too?
This is Saron here. Yes, Dr. Harpsheets, that's counting as accurate. And I think part of the discussion was inclusive of your comments and also Dr. Tate's comments of the supervision required and the care needed, or the research that was going to cover.
Dr. Phillips, does that answer your question adequately?
Actually, no. I mean, if they're going to be supervising interns that are delivering a service, they're not in a non-mental health function. They're in a mental health function. Let me just finish my thought. That being Instead, I think what we've got is a hybrid between mental health and non-mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any objection to the supervision plan, but I do have an objection to it being characterized as non-mental health. If you're supervising people that are doing assessment, that's a mental health function. It may be within the context of research, but typically in those situations, we would want somebody supervising that was licensed to supervise people in a mental health function, or someone that was doing it within the context of an internship. So I won't vote against the motion, but I think we're fooling ourselves if we're pretending this is a purely non-mental health situation.
One part of the discussion, Dr. Phillips, was that this person will be supervised by a licensed psychologist, and we felt that that licensed psychologist should ensure the trainees' activities are not mental health related. So we felt that since this was a school setting, and we do have school psychologists who are licensed by the Board of Behavioral Sciences who are doing somewhat assessment there, we felt that there was a comfort level for us by having an actual licensed psychologist to ensure that that boundary is not crossed.
I would agree with that, but I don't think it makes it non-mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Supervising people that are delivering a mental health service, in this case assessment, is within the context of mental health. I don't think we want to get in the position of characterizing it as being non-mental health. I'm in favor of approving the supervision plan. I just think we have to be very careful about how we language these things.
Mm-hmm.
Starting to define things as being non-mental health that, in my mind at least, are clearly mental health services.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Phillips, this is Dr. Tate. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
That was the lengthy part of the discussion. I felt that that there was mental health services being provided, but as we discussed this case further and at length, what Dr. Harbsheets is characterizing is what we decided as the committee, as we do have this licensed psychologist taking responsibility, but there are definitely mental health services in this discussion.
Right. So it's not clean in the sense that it's all stuff that's non-mental health. On the other hand, it does feel like it's an adequately structured program of supervision for us to feel comfortable with the services she's going to be delivering.
And I would agree with that. We thought it was very well thought out, probably one of the better structured presentations that we received that day, paperwork that we received that day.
Yeah, it's very professional.
I think that your use of the word hybrid, Dr. Phillips, is really accurate. And it really, we have just a choice. Is it mental health? Is it non-mental health? But but in reality, as you say, it is a hybrid. But we felt that the plan was a good one. We felt comfortable, and particularly that a licensed psychologist was supervising. And we would like to recommend that the board grant or approve this plan.
Have we had a motion yet? I'll make the motion to approve the plan.
I think we have a motion on the floor. Sue, I think.
Okay.
Dr. Harbsheets, I just wanted to comment that I am in agreement with Dr. Phillips, and I understand that that the recommendation of the licensure committee to recommend the plan, but I think that the wording for the motion, we can just drop the non-mental health area, so it's not defined. We can just grant the alternate plan for supervised professional experience.
Ms. Marks, because this is pursuant to Section 1387.3 and Title 16, do we need to have the words non-mental health services in the motion, or can we do what Dr. Kasuga is suggesting?
Well, I think, let me quick get to the section, but I think that the board is here looking at these because a non-mental health plan needs to be approved, whereas a non-mental health plan does not need approval.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes.
So the question is, if you drop it and you say, well, it's not really, it's mental health, it's not non-mental health, why are we here?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a hybrid and it needs approval because of that nature, then I think you need to indicate why the board is even acting on it. And so I'm not sure. I think it makes sense to drop the reference to non-mental health.
So you're saying that we should not drop it, correct?
Correct, because otherwise I think excuse me, otherwise I think it's confusing as to why the board is even here to approve it. Mm-hmm. Right, because normally you wouldn't. If it's mental health, the board does not make these decisions. Right?
Yeah.
So
instead of saying non-mental
so
health
either you say it's mental health, we don't need to be here, or it's non-mental health, or some hybrid, in which case we are we are here to approve it under the reg section.
Could we say it's primarily non-mental health services? Because that's really what this is. The teaching, the research, some consultation even are primarily mental health. Or maybe, or the other thing I had, when we leave in non-mental health, it's saying to the supervisor, basically, you have to make sure, you are responsible for making sure that the services provided by this person are non-mental health related.
I'm sorry, Dr. Hubbs, it's part of what I'm hearing is distorted, so I'm not sure I'm hearing you accurately.
So what I'm saying is that if we leave in non-mental health services, we're saying to the supervisor that you are responsible for making sure that what this person is doing is non-mental health services. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, but I'm not. Your question makes sense, but I'm not necessarily sure that that's what you're doing.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Can we say including mental health and non-mental health services, or including non-mental health services and mental health services? Because I think we are authorizing them to supervise relative to non-mental health services, but we're also authorizing them to supervise the applicant relative to mental health services. So since it falls in the hybrid category and we have to approve as to non-mental health, can we just make it clear that it's a hybrid?
Yeah, you can make clear that what you're approving is the portion that's non-mental health, because the other portion of it doesn't need approval.
That sounds good to me, because we have a licensed psychologist, and if the person is doing something that's mental health services, then this is a licensed psychologist, and we need to approve that. But we're approving as far as that is non-mental health services. We're not saying that this person, if they engage in mental health services in some way, that we're going to deny approval of those hours, correct?
Correct, right. You're not disapproving any portion of it. You're just not necessarily approving it because you don't have to. It does not have to be approved.
Right.
I just think we need to be more clear about what we're doing than if all we're approving is the non-mental health service portion of the supervision plan. And I think we have to make it clear that there is also a mental health service portion of it, which does not require approval. Because otherwise, I think we're sending a confusing order back to them. Are we saying that it's all non-mental health services? Are we saying part of it's non-mental health services, but you've also got to consider the fact that there are mental health services? I just think we need to be very explicit in the way that we're languaging this so that they're aware that part of this is considered to be mental health services and it doesn't require our approval. I don't know how you want to language that.
Could we, Mr. Fu, could you perhaps rephrase the motion that what the board would be approving is the non-mental health portion of the supervision plan provided?
Happy to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Do we need a second for that revised motion?
I do believe you would want a second for a revised motion.
Okay, could someone second, please?
I will second. This is Tate.
Okay. Public comment. Could you please open the public comment box?
Comment box is open on the lower right-hand corner. Instructions are on the screen. I currently do not see any public comments coming in. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And Mr. Gage, could you call for the vote?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we have one request in item 9D. So Mr. Fu and I thought we would just finish up number 9 and then take the lunch break. So this is a request from a psychologist who took courses from providers who were not approved providers in satisfaction of the continuing education requirement. This person took 39 credits in 2 courses and would like to apply 12 of those credits to the 36-hour requirement. The person in their practice does neuropsychology and psychoeducational assessment, and the licensure committee felt that the course content did involve topics which were relevant to the direct delivery of service, and courses of that type could be found in the area where the licensee is located. And we recommend to the board that we deny this psychologist request to count 12 of these 39 credits towards their continuing education requirement. Would someone like to make a motion?
This is Cervantes. I move.
A second, please. Looking for a second to Ms. Cervantes.
Phillips, second.
Okay. Any discussion? No? Okay. Could we open the public comment box?
Public comment box has been opened in the lower right-hand corner. There's an instruction slide on your screen, and we will hold for you to enter your comment. At this time, I do not see any public comments. Would you like to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And Mr. Gage, would you call for the vote, please?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Hey, back to you, Mr. Fu.
Thank you, Dr. Harbsheets, for leading us through that. So we'll go ahead and take our lunch break, and I think we're going to try to come back at 1 o'clock. But if that's going to be a challenge, to please text Ms. Sorrick or just let Ms. Sorrick know by email or however that the 1 o'clock will be a challenge, and we will adjust accordingly. So we look forward to returning back at 1 o'clock and going through the remainder of the items. Thank you.